not going live. It's not running. For some reason.
Doesn't make sense. Moshe has a replacement to David.
Yeah, what's David?
I just forgot how to do this.
Nah, it's okay.
I haven't done it in a while.
We'll figure it out. Good morning, Ariel. Ariel, so good to see you. It's not broadcasting, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have the live timer.
Just try redo the definitions, I guess. Okay, we're going to keep learning Torah in any case. We're at the top of page 368. Good morning, Ariel.
Is it working? Okay.
So it is working, after all, even though it's not running. Terrific.
This is delayed.
You could turn it off.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, we are live. We are live.
Amazing.
So, whose time is this? It'll be mine.
Okay, so top of page 368. When the men of the Great Assembly instituted the holiday of Purim, many large cities, especially in Eretz Yisrael, had a tradition that they had been surrounded by a wall at the time of Yoshua ben Nun. The residents of these cities therefore celebrate Purim on the 15th of Adar. Over the centuries, however, these cities have been destroyed, and their traditions regarding their status have been lost. That's the most important thing, is that we don't know. Some modern cities, like Lod, have the same name as cities that were known to have been surrounded by a wall at the time of Yoshua ben Nun. The problem is that we do not know with certainty whether the modern city located exactly where the city stood in Yoshua's time, or perhaps it is simply named after the ancient city, but is actually situated somewhere else nearby. Some ancient cities became devoid of Jews. We do not know whether they existed at the time of Yoshua because the traditions regarding their status were lost. There are other cities, Bezrat Hashem, this coming Shabbat we'll be spending together in Hebron. We know existed at the time, although we do not know if they had a wall. There's only one city concerning which there is a clear tradition that it was surrounded by a wall at the time of Yoshua ben Nun, our holy and glorious city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the only place where Purim is celebrated nowadays on the 15th of Adar. We will first elaborate on the laws of Jerusalem and then discuss the laws of the various uncertain places. So you can see in the footnote all the different discussions of Lod, of Hebron, of all the Tiberia as mentioned. As you can see on page 369 underneath the line in the footnote, it speaks about Tiberia. That the Gemara already mentions that it was uncertain. And so Beit El as well. And if you look at the bottom of the page, he says, Rav Shariah Devlitsky states based on Igrot HaRa'aya, Rav Kook, that one should not determine halacha based on archaeological evidence. And Rav Melamed, his father, chief rabbi of Beit El, says Beit El should celebrate on the 14th like everybody else. But we'll come back to those doubtful cities after we discuss the law of proper Jerusalem and how far Jerusalem extends. And then we'll go to the other cities and see when they celebrate. Okay? Number 2, page 369, the top of the page. Natan, take it away.
Jerusalem and its environs.
Environs, I believe it should be pronounced, but it's probably two ways. Moshe, your environs?
I've heard environs before. Yeah, the sages said, a walled city and all that adjoins it. What does this sound?
Samuch, yes, 2 words. Samuch v'nir'eh. We'll write them down. Exactly, samuch is close.
Yeah.
You might know this. Let me stop you for a minute. You might be learning in Ulpan. Is anybody here studying in Ulpan? Studying Hebrew? Have you gotten up to this topic? It's called smichut.
Yes. You have a noun.
2 nouns. 2 nouns next to each other. Next to each other. Samuch. So that's why it's called smichut. Samuch means next to. So you have to celebrate, of course, Purim in Jerusalem on the 15th. But also it says any place which is samuch. So that means next to, or adjacent would be a better word.
Yeah, better adjacent. That's already.
Adjacent.
Aliyah, that's next to.
Next to and adjacent. That's samuch ve nir'eh. So what is he quoting from the Talmud? Nir'eh means it's seen. Now, seen is a little bit problematic one because I can see Jerusalem from Tekoa, which is 20 kilometers away. So what am I supposed to celebrate like Jerusalem? Because I can see it from, if you stand up on a high hill, you can see. Especially nowadays, there's skyscrapers in Jerusalem, somewhat. And the string bridge, you can see it far away. So is that considered seeing Jerusalem? So this one is a little problematic. The adjacent one is going to be more practical, but we're going to see. Let's see the inside. But that's where it starts from. The Talmud says anything which is samuch v'nireh, two conditions. A walled city. Go ahead from the start again.
The sage said, a walled city and all that adjoins it, a samuch, and all that is visible with it,
nir'eh imo. Nir'eh, it's seen with it.
Are reckoned as a walled city. Therefore, not only do the residents of the old city of Jerusalem celebrate Purim on the 15th of Adar, but so do the residents of all the neighborhoods adjacent to the old city. Even though the city has expanded greatly over the years, each and every neighborhood takes on the status of the old city and reads the Megillah on the 15th, since each one is adjacent to one next to it.
Go ahead.
While the neighborhoods of Jerusalem were still being built, a question arose regarding the status of neighborhoods that were originally built far away from the rest of the city.
Like Kiryat Moshe, by the way.
Right.
Kiryat Moshe was one of the earliest neighborhoods of the expanding Jerusalem, but it wasn't contiguous. It didn't like they didn't move directly over to the next hill. They skipped a few hills and then built Kiryat Moshe over there.
And then they filled the gaps in
and then they filled in the gaps, exactly. So, for example, go ahead, most recently,
the question came up regarding the neighborhoods of Hamot and Harnof. Some authorities maintain that only neighborhoods to which there is a continuous stretch of houses from the old city are considered part of Jerusalem. If, however, there is a gap of 141 and a third amot, 67.8 meters, between the two areas, they are considered separate locations. Accordingly, the authorities ruled that residents of Ramot and Harnof should read the Megillah on the 14th.
Do you know where Harnof is, right? We're in Kiryat Moshe. If you go out of the building and you go turn right, you get to the kiosk, right? The circle. If you turn left and keep walking for 10 minutes, past all there's stores. It's basically an industrial zone with lots of offices and stores. Nobody really lives there. But right past that, if you walk for 10 minutes, there's a whole neighborhood. It's called Harnof. And lots of people live there. But what about that gap of 10-minute walk in between them? Is that considered to be Jerusalem's extending? Or maybe they're separate. Maybe it's more than 70 meters. 70 meters is a 1-minute walk. This is a 10-minute walk. So for sure, if there's no houses there, some people said, it's not Jerusalem. Harnof is not Jerusalem. And therefore, you should keep the Purim on the 14th of Adar, not the 15th of Adar. Also Ramot, exactly. However, others maintain, go ahead.
Others maintain that all neighborhoods that are considered part of Jerusalem municipality for tax purposes, and all the more so if they are surrounded by the same Eruv, take on the status of Jerusalem and the Megillah exclusively on the 15th. Thus, they ruled the residents of Harnof and Ramot must read the Megillah on the 15th. A former chief rabbi of Jerusalem, Rav Shalom Mases and Rav Yitzhak Kulitz, ruled in this manner, and this is the prevalent custom. All these rulings were decided over time, as Jerusalem expanded. With the help of God, builder of Jerusalem, the city will continue to be built up, and even the furthest neighborhoods eventually become adjacent and linked to the rest of the city, until it becomes clear to all that they are considered part of Jerusalem.
So you can see from the footnote also that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach concurred with this ruling that they are considered to be part of Jerusalem. What are the two considerations which they mentioned that make them part of Jerusalem, even though there might be a gap? They're not quite adjacent, those neighborhoods. Tax, but municipality, and the Eruv. Very interesting,
The
tax tax status
Right.
is probably one of the most stereotypically Jewish things I've ever read, being used to make a determination. Like,
Right. Right. Well,
They
listen.
give us money
If you
for
get
our
a,
taxes.
You give us our traditions.
you pay taxes to Jerusalem
yeah.
municipality, not to Tel Aviv municipality. It's not its own. It's part of Jerusalem. There's other reasons, but yeah,
Celebrate 2 times.
we're getting to that. Some people do that.
So
Some
they
people
can
do that.
Celebrate, they go there and celebrate. That's it.
Very interesting. Some people they actually say that. The big question was Ramot. Ramot at one point really was far away,
Right.
also,
it's not so.
and now they filled up the gaps in the middle. So some people
But
think we
there's
should
a
change.
highway between.
True.
There's a highway.
Does that consider to be an interruption? Sometimes you have highways in the middle of cities, though, so not necessarily. Take a look at the bottom, page 371. Chazon Ish and Mikrai Kodesh ruled similarly, but they ruled that the residents of Givat Shaul, right, that's right next to us,
That's next to us, yeah.
right, should read the Megillah on the 15th, despite the fact that hundreds of meters of undeveloped land separated between that neighborhood and the rest of the city at the time. Apparently they ruled this way because the residents of Givat Shaul were dependent, I'm on page 372 underneath the line, were dependent on the city for all their affairs.
I think that's a good reasoning.
But you can see there's many different opinions. At the beginning, Rav Eliashiv said that Ramot should read on the 14th, but then he changed his ruling as the city expanded. Then there's more history about Nevaseret, another outskirts of Jerusalem.
Bethlehem?
Beit Lechem is a little farther, and there's no Jews that live in Beit Lechem right now, so it doesn't really matter. But,
It's right next.
Um,
Like if you go to Gilo, there's
yeah.
just the highway. And,
I think there might be 100 meters there that are not settled. So, in general, up till today, there's some people in Ramot, because in recent history, the topography changed. Not the topography, but the residential areas changed. Some people are stuck in the past, and they say, well, one time, Rav Eliashiv said we have to do Purim on the 14th. So many people in Ramot actually celebrate both, just to be sure. Without a bracha, I think, on the first day, most authorities now are leaning towards 15th. It's part of Jerusalem. It's essentially part of Jerusalem.
Right.
Also, probably contiguous, probably considered to be adjacent. But some people, they read the Megillah on the 14th and give somebody a gift, give some extra tzedakah on the 14th too, and see if you're hearing the Megillah 4 times. Once at night, once in the day of the 14th, just in case. And once in the night, once in the day of the 15th, of course, because that's probably the proper day to celebrate Purim. So we have people, we're going to hear more about that in the uncertain places, what to do, and exactly, Ramot, most people, I think, go straight with the 15th, but there's other uncertain places, as we're going to see. Top of page 372.
You want me to read?
Sure, go ahead.
Uncertain places. There is uncertainty about when to celebrate Purim in the following cities: Tiberia, Hebron, Shem, Jaffa, Lod, Aza, Tzvat, Akko, and Haifa. Some add the following cities to the list: Beit She'in, Jericho, Beersheba,
Ramla.
Ramla, yeah.
2 different cities.
Right.
Yes.
In addition, the following cities outside the land of Israel have uncertain status. What is this? Tyre,
yeah.
Sodom,
Tzor, the ancient Tzor is pronounced in the Bible. Here in English you say Tyre.
Sodom, Damascus, Izmir, and Baghdad.
Oh, so the Jews in Baghdad.
Right. The
It's
Rishonim
doubt.
disagreed about how residents of cities of uncertain status should conduct themselves on Purim. All agreed that the Megillah must be read on the 14th of Adar with a bracha in these cities, since even a resident of Yerushalayim fulfills his obligation. Bedi Avad. If he reads the Megillah on the 14th, when most of the world reads it,
What does B'diavad mean? Again, we have to make sure that we know the terms. Turn 2 pages over. Turn 2 pages, and you'll see the official definition on page 382. B'di avad. Avad means done in Aramaic, a level of performance that ex post facto means after the fact satisfies an obligation in a less than ideal manner. So that's b'di avad. The opposite of b'di avad is
Latchila.
Very good. Find that on page 385. In the glossary, ab initio, a level of performance that satisfies an obligation in an ideal manner. So we have, these are two opposites, b'diavad, ex post facto, and lechatchila, ab initio. If you're going to speak Latin, that'll help you. If it doesn't, lechatchila is the ideal fashion of doing it. B'diavad is after the fact, or, if you're not able to perform in an ideal way, this also is good enough. B'diavad means good enough. So if someone, even in Jerusalem, would read the Megillah on the 14th, he would be Yotzei, B'diavad. It would be good enough if he would still fulfill his obligation. So for sure, best chance of you fulfilling your obligation is to for sure read it on the 14th. If you're in a city and you don't know 14th, 15th, best is to do it on 14th, because even a Jerusalemite would fulfill it on the 14th, because that's the original day, the main day of Purim. Let's just finish it and I'll take questions. Okay, therefore, go ahead.
Therefore, in places of uncertain status, the Megillah must be read lechatchila on the 14th with a bracha. The question is whether residents of these places must read it on the 15th as well.
Keep going.
Some maintain the residents of uncertain places celebrate Purim exclusively on the 14th, with no obligation whatsoever to read the Megillah on the 15th. Only those who wish to follow a pious custom read it on the 15th without a bracha.
Okay, so right. Of course, like everything, there's two options: 14th, 15th, both, or neither. No, so there's no option of neither, right? Whenever you have to, so it's either first day is the main day, second day is the main day, or you do both, and you do both with you can't do both with a bracha because it's either or. So you have to choose which one's the main one to say with the bracha, and then you could say, well, only one, and not do the other one whatsoever. So we see all the different opinions. Finish up the last opinion. Others maintain
that in places of uncertain status, the Megillah must
be read on the 15th as well.
Must be read on the 15th as well, without a bracha, so that the uncertainty surrounding these cities is not forgotten. An additional reason is to enhance the honor of Eretz Israel. Nevertheless, the bracha is omitted because of the uncertainty of the matter. The poskim debate the matter of the other mitzvot of Purim, mishloch manot, matanot, le'yivunim, and the seudah. Some maintain that residents of the uncertain cities observe these mitzvot only on the first day, which Purim is for most of the world. Others maintain that they must perform these mitzvot on the second day as well. People who live adjacent to cities of uncertain status observe Purim exclusively on the 14th, as only those who live adjacent to the city that reads the Megillah on the 15th with certainty take on its status, not those who live adjacent to a city of uncertain status. However, some authorities rule stringently, stating that even in places that are near a city of uncertain status, the Megillah should be read on the 15th as well.
Okay, so you can see there's so many opinions.
Right.
Some opinions. What do you do? Of course, in practice, you're going to ask your rabbi, right? But what does Rav Melamed say if you ask him? Go ahead. In practice,
most uncertain places today rely on the lenient opinion and celebrate Purim exclusively on the 14th. Only in places where the likelihood that it was truly a walled city is greater, like in Tveria and Hebron, do many people customarily read the Megillah on the 15th as well. Some even fulfill Purim's other mitzvot on the 15th as well in these cities.
Okay, so bottom line is, most people do the 14th. It's a regular Purim like everywhere else. It's not Jerusalem. But you're going to find people that are going to be Machon Meir and have a second reading just to be safe. And if you want to get drunk one more day, okay, if you can get off work, why not? Okay, we'll take some questions. Yes?
Why is that difference between being in a walled city and not being in a walled city?
So we mentioned it the other day. It's a little bit curious. The Megillah mentions a historical reason for Shushan, not all walled cities. The rabbis expanded the law of Shushan to every walled city. So why is Shushan different? In the Megillah it says that on Shushan they didn't rest on the 14th. All right, it says that in the Megillah, the battle was on the 13th. That's why we fast, to commemorate the fasting of the battle, to win the war by our teshuvah, not necessarily by the might of our hands. And then on the 14th, we celebrate it, that we won. So that's why everybody celebrates on the 14th. What about Shushan? So it says that on Shushan, they fought for an extra day.
Because
The Jews asked. It was the capital city. Maybe there were, more people that needed to be the evildoers that needed to be chased after and rooted out. In any case, the Megillah tells that they battled in Shushan on the 14th as well. So they didn't rest until the 15th. And they celebrated on the 15th. And so
people in walled cities, when do they fast?
13th. They also fast on the 13th. They don't fast for 2 days. Although they might have to, according to this explanation, right? If they're fasting to commemorate the battle, and they battled for 2 days, they might have to fast for 2 days. But we don't do that. So it's strange. Those people who in Jerusalemites, you fast on the 13th, do nothing on the 14th. So you work like a regular day, almost. And then you have a Purim totally separate from the fast. It's the way it works.
Because usually the fast is like broken by reading the Megillah.
Right. That's what you're used to. But in Jerusalem, it's different. Yeah. Good question. Other questions come up?
About Jericho?
Jericho. Nobody lives there.
No, but it's a walled city that was destroyed by Roman, and no one can rebuild.
That's right. He cursed out somebody who rebuilt it, but then somebody did.
No, they built the city, not the wall.
I don't know. It says that they had doors to the city, so if there's doors, there must have been a wall.
I
So.
was there is no door.
Oh, not anymore. Not anymore. I was there many times, but this is still going back to biblical times.
Yeah.
Right, so it's archaeology to find the original wall and to find the second wall, but
We were reading Parshas Kisisa in Haftarah
what does it say about?
Achav who rebuilt Jericho.
Is it Achav who rebuilt it? I think there was somebody else.
And that's Achav.
Was it Achav?
And his son died, right?
Yeah, all his family died. Yeah.
Well, the
Except
curse,
for,
the curse is still on.
Is it?
I remember it a little differently, but
Of was someone during Achav's reign?
and there's somebody else during Achav's reign, but it wasn't Achav.
No, wasn't
His name was I can't remember his name right now.
And it said like
His son, right? His two sons died, as the curse was that bivchiro something he'll make the wall ubetziro yatziv dlateha, that he'll put on the walls of the city, but his younger son will die. So the curse was that both of the person's sons will die, and it happened. The big question to me is, why did he keep going after the first one died? Yeah. Apparently, this was so important to him to build Jericho. He sacrificed his two sons. It's a horrible story.
It's done already, so let's continue.
Maybe. I mean, I think it teaches us that sometimes we have we get caught up in a concept, in our patterns of thinking. I'm gonna do this no matter what, and then you don't let anything bother you, and then anything change your mind. It's dangerous. Very dangerous to the children, in any case. Okay, so this is the 2 days of Purim. Now, so for all intents and purposes, most people who live in Jerusalem, all parts of Jerusalem, even Gilo also it's a question, but
you can see the whole city.
right. So that's what I was saying. If you're relying only on the seeing, it's very difficult because you can see from far away. Because the cities are full of there's mountains all around. And so usually we don't go only by the visibility of the city. If you could take a look at the page 370 in the footnote number 3, in the first paragraph, is the place still considered part of the walled city if it can be seen from the city, but is very far from it? He explains the Gemara refers to a place that is subordinate to the city and considered part of the same district. Similarly, Ritva writes that this law applies only when the residents of the surrounding village participate in the affairs of the city. In other words, it's very hard to go only by this one criterion, being seen, because then, you make anything in the entire... Sometimes the whole country can see Jerusalem, so they're all considered Jerusalem just because they can see. So this has to be a little bit more than just being seen. It has to be part of the municipality or somehow that's the place, that's the major city. If you take a look continue on page 370 underneath the line. In contrast, Rambam maintains that even a place from which a walled city can be seen is not considered part of the city if it is more than a mile away. The Rambam adds a limit of one mile. A mile is an ancient, it's approximately a kilometer.
It's a mile? No.
It's approximately a mile, a little bit, a little more. The only distinction is that when a city is visible, we measure the mile as the crow flies, and when it is not visible, we measure it by a straight terrestrial line. There's different ways to measure this exactly. As you can see in the footnote. But the bottom line is, if you're living in a particular town, which is near Jerusalem or part of Jerusalem, you go and ask the rabbi. Every town has a rabbi and has a community, and you do what they do. You don't make up your own. Say, I hold differently. I'm going to go like the Rambam. You don't do that. You practice the way the Jewish community practices, and the rabbi is the leader of the community, and you ask the rabbi, and he'll tell you what to do. You might say, make a bracha on the 14th, don't make a bracha on the 15th. Or in Ramot, perhaps the opposite, he might say, make a bracha on the 15th. And the 14th, if you want to be extra careful, do the Megillah as well there, because the tides change based on the way the building goes. Now, for most of us, though, this is really not a major question. I don't live in Tiberia, and I don't live in Hebron, although we're going there for Shabbat. Ask them which day they celebrate Purim. Be an interesting field study to see what the current practice is, because we said it's one of these doubtful cities. What do they do? Do they do it on my guess is they do 14th with a blessing, and some people read it also on the 15th just to be safe. However, the biggest practical question for us is, because we have buses and trains, and you jump on the train, you're in Tel Aviv in half an hour. What if you travel? Do you become a Tel Avivian in a half an hour? That's the next section, section 4 on page 375, which we're going to do right now. The biggest question is section 4. Yeah, somebody had a question the first. Yeah. Go ahead.
Kavanah is not a matter?
No, not so much. You either get defined as a resident of, a dweller of a city that has a wall or a city that doesn't have a wall.
Let's say like something happened.
We're going to see exactly. That's coming up. Some people say it does. Kavanah does matter when it comes to traveling on the 14th and 15th. And some people say it is less of a impact.
Even at 15, and then I read the Megillah.
Change your mind.
16, let's say.
The 16th you can't read the Megillah. So the 14th or 15th. That's the latest,
even
yeah.
The Kavanah, I wanted to be, but I couldn't be.
Right. So you can mess yourself up.
To fulfill the mitzvah, I do on the 15th to read the Megillah.
Right. We're going to talk about that. Some people say it's critical. And the question is when you had the different kavanah. Let's say you were planning to travel to Jerusalem all night long on the 14th. And so you didn't read the Megillah. And then your plans change. And you're not going to travel. So I still am a Tel Avivian. Right? The night of the 14th, you're planning to go to Jerusalem. So you just say, I don't have to read the Megillah because I'm not a Tel Avivian. I'm going to become a Jerusalemite. By the morning, I'm going to be in Jerusalem. We'll see where the dividing line is. And then it's 3 a.m. For some reason, you're up. And then you realize, all your plans for a Jerusalem trip, they all got canceled. The person went away. The person got corona. Who knows what happened. And so you can't go to Jerusalem on the 15th. Well then, okay, I'm going to stay here in Tel Aviv. That means I'm a Tel Avivian. But I have to read the Megillah. Once at night and once in the morning. But it's 3 a.m. Okay, I can still read the Megillah. I've got an hour before the nighttime finishes. Where are you going to find a Megillah reading at 3 a.m? It's a problem. There is actually dial a Megillah service. all night long. You can find somebody that's got a kosher Megillah. You may not have a minion, but you will be able to read it from a kosher Megillah. If you have your own Megillah, it's quite useful for those situations. But we're going to see exactly intention. No, on the phone, that's a bigger problem. He'll come, he'll call, yeah, or you go to him, yeah. On the phone is less of a problem, is more of a problem because, we talked about the digital sound as opposed to the real sound. But, yes, so it gets quite complicated. That's section 4. Let's see. Rabbi Melamed has a way of making things simple. Even things very complicated, he makes it very simple. So we'll try to follow him. Yeah.
Just an example. When I come to Israel the first time,
Yeah.
I had one delay flight, so I was 26 hours in Ethiopia.
Huh.
Because,
Wow.
they delay one
And
day
was it
my
Purim?
flight. No.
You spent Purim in Ethiopia? No.
No.
But it happens, you're saying. Sometimes, yeah.
One day.
Yeah.
So let's say that
Unexpected.
this happened in Purim.
Exactly, yeah. There's problems. So
Could be.
probably the best thing is to advise don't travel on Purim, at least without a Megillah, because then you might get messed up. But yeah. Okay, so of course things change. Plans always change, especially now we travel. It could be significant regarding this halacha. Let's take a look. We have time. Let's do it. This is as I said, it's a relatively current or new halacha. It's on the books from way back when. People didn't live near Jerusalem. People didn't travel as easily as they used to. So it's really the last 200 years that the rabbis had to really answer practical questions on this topic in a major way. It's like almost the most practical question, especially for single guys like you, yeshiva guys, who they want to party in Tel Aviv on one day and party in Jerusalem the other day, and they're always traveling. So it becomes a major issue. So let's see what the rabbi said. Section 4, page 375. Okay, Micha, will you read for us, please?
Section 5.
4, actually. Page 375, section 4.
Traveling between world and on-world cities. Since Purim is celebrated in on-world cities on the 14th and in world cities today only in Jerusalem on the 15th, many questions arise regarding one who travels from an on-world city to Jerusalem, or vice versa. When should such a person observe the holiday of Purim? The general rule is that a person's obligation is determined by his location on the day of Purim, not by his permanent residence throughout the year, because one who stays in an on-world city for even one day is nonetheless considered a resident of an on-world city with respect to the laws of Purim. The determining moment is Olot HaShachar on the 14th for on-world cities and on the 15th for world cities, because that is when the obligation of the daytime Megillah reading begins.
Okay, so this is, the footnote says, the issue is very detailed and complicated. This is one opinion, the major opinion that Rav Melamed paskins by, and I think many poskim follow this guideline, and that you can be a Jerusalemite for one day, you can be a Tel Avivian for one day. What determines your residence on that day? So for the laws of Megillah, for the laws of Purim, we follow the beginning of the day, beginning of the morning, because we mentioned the 4 mitzvot of Purim must be done in the day of Purim, not the night before. Even though there is a Megillah the night before, and that's going to complicate matters because you're only going to get defined as a, let's say, a Jerusalemite on the morning of, but if you're a Jerusalemite, you ought to already have obligations that start the night before. Right. So that's why it's so complicated. But let's read the simple, the first, let's call it this, the first and basic opinion that Rabbi Melamed presents is that you get defined as a Jerusalemite or as a Tel Avivian on the day of Purim. For the 14th, you'll get defined on the morning of the 14th. If you're in Tel Aviv, you'll get defined as someone who's obligated to celebrate Purim in Tel Aviv. If you're in Tel Aviv on the morning of the 14th, and you'll get defined as a Jerusalemite on the morning of the 15th, if you happen to be in Jerusalem, on the morning of the 15th It's your physical being, presence, thank you, your physical presence in the city, either walled or unwalled, on that day of obligation that obligates you to finish up all the rest of the mitzvot of Purim. Megillah, Matanot Levyanim, Mishloach Manot, and Mishteh, right, Mem. We wanted to start with a Mem, so we say Mishteh. Okay? 4 Mems. What is the beginning of the day? He says here, dawn, Alot HaShachar, which is a little bit before, it's like an hour before Netzach Hama, before the sunrise. It's a halachic time called dawn, 70 minutes before the sun goes up. That's the defining time. If you're in Jerusalem at that time, you're obligated as a Jerusalemite. Now we're going to see that might create a situation where you can be obligated in both. If you're in Tel Aviv at the dawn of the 14th, you'll be a Tel Avivian for the day. And then if you travel to Jerusalem, and the morning of Jerusalem, you're in Jerusalem, you'll be a Jerusalemite for that day. So you have 2 Purims. 2 Purims. Depends where you are on the 14th. Then depends where you are on the 15th. If you're also the opposite, let's say in the morning of the 14th, you're in Jerusalem. And the morning of the 15th, you're in Tel Aviv. No Purim. No Purim. You're not obligated on Tel Aviv because you're in Jerusalem at that day. And you're not obligated in Jerusalem on the 15th because you're in Tel Aviv that day. So you might have a way to skip Purim. There's a legend that someone who was like sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say anti-religious, but someone who was really against Purim, doesn't like Purim, he did that on purpose. Yeah, I'm not going to celebrate Purim this year. It's like, what's that called? The Grinch? The Grinch who stole Purim? That's it. No Purim this year because I'm just going to be a resident of the opposite kind of city. Right. And those days, technically, it sounds like it works. Right, according to this interpretation, obviously there's many different considerations, but of what he presented in the first paragraph, that's the rule. If you're physically present on the day of obligation in that city, you're obligated for that day. Okay, let's. I'll just one more comment. It's very unique. Most cities, to become a resident, what do you have to? You pay taxes. You have to prove that you've got a rental contract for an apartment in that city. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm a Jerusalemite because I'm here at dawn." It's a little bit of a very halachic definition. Just for Purim is this the rule. When it comes to other things, like, do you have to pay taxes as a Jerusalemite? Do you get the rights? There's a card. If you live in Jerusalem, you can get a special Jerusalemite card, and you get discounts at various events and for various restaurants. It's a cool thing to do. You guys should look into it. You live in Jerusalem, so you can get a discount as a Jerusalemite. But if you go to them and say, "Hi, I'm a Jerusalemite because on the 15th of Adar I was in Jerusalem," usually it doesn't qualify you as a Jerusalemite. But for this matter of Purim, we're talking about the matter of obligations of the Purim day. The halacha is saying what defines you as a Jerusalemite is your presence in the city at the morning, the beginning of those obligations, the day of obligation, which is the 15th in the morning. Is that clear? Yes. There's one other opinion, and I'll take your question. Some people say no. What defines you in terms of the obligations of Purim, we look at it globally. Everybody gets defined as a Tel Avivian or a Jerusalemite on the morning of the 14th, the main day of Purim. So if in the morning of the 14th, you're in Tel Aviv, you become a Tel Avivian. And if you're in Jerusalem on the morning of the 14th, you become defined as a Jerusalemite, even if you leave afterwards. Which makes sense, right? To some extent. You can say that you got defined as a Jerusalemite, so what if you leave? You got defined as a Jerusalem not on the morning of the 15th, but on the morning of the 14th, because it's a plus or a minus. It's an either or. If you're not a member of the unwalled cities on the 14th, so you're a member of the walled cities. There's no two defining times. There's one defining time. Some people say that's on the morning of the 14th. But the way he presented it here, there's two defining times. For the unwalled cities, it's the morning of the 14th. For the walled cities, Jerusalem, it's the morning of the 15th. Is that clear? I'm sorry, I hope I didn't confuse you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You're trapping the
It's a trap.
looping.
That's it. That's very complicated. Okay, you had a question, Moshe, before we go on? Yeah.
No, you already answered it.
Okay, perfect.
Another question.
Yeah.
On the other days, like for Yom Tovim in Flowers, how you can define it?
Excellent. Good comparison. The closest comparison to having 2 dates for one holiday is the residents of Chutz La'aretz that keep a second day of Yom Tov, right? What defines you as a resident of Israel? We don't have a second day of Yom Tov. Here, nobody used it's quite uncommon to say, well, there is an opinion, the Chacham Tzvi's opinion was a posuk in the in the 18th century. He said, if you're in Israel, you're a resident of Israel. And if you're in Chutz La'aretz, you're a resident of Chutz La'aretz. It goes by where your physical presence is. And therefore, sort of like when in Rome, do as the Romans. So if you're in Chutz La'aretz, you have to keep 2 days. Even if you live 11 months out of the year in Israel, if you happen to be on the festival, Pesach or Sukkot, in Chutz La'aretz you have to keep 2 days. And the opposite as well. Even if you live all year round in Italy, all year round you live in New York, if you happen to come to Israel for the holiday, you keep 1 day. This is a one opinion, which is similar to what we're saying here. Physical presence is what many poskim debate this, although this opinion is getting traction in recent years. A lot of people like that, especially people that like to fly to Israel for the holidays. And, in Israel, it's uncomfortable to keep 2 days when everybody else is keeping 1 day. So it's gaining a lot of traction, this opinion. But many poskim say when it comes to the second day of Yom Tov or 1 day of Yom Tov, we don't use the same criterion like we use here. Even here, it's not 100% agreed upon. But we use a different definition. Definition by the holidays, by the second day of Yom Tov, is more permanent residence. Some people say, you want to become an Israelite, somebody who lives in Israel and only keep 1 day, you have to have a Tudat Zahut. You have to have made Aliyah. Or some people say you have to be living in Israel for an entire cycle of 3 festivals in a row. Then you become an Israelite. And you don't have to keep the second day of Yom Tov in Israel. There's different opinions, but the closest one to this one is the Chacham Tzvi. It's a different debate. We'll talk about that when we get to Bezrat Hashem, the next holiday coming up, Pesach. And whether you keep 2 days or 1 day is another question. But first we have Purim. Okay, for Purim, Rav Melamed suggested that the criterion should be, where are you physically on the morning of the obligation? For the 14th, are you physically in Tel Aviv, for example? And on the 15th, are you physically in Jerusalem? Let's keep going. Renan, a resident of Jerusalem, page 376.
Resident of Jerusalem wants to celebrate Purim on the 14th. Must enter in a walled city or on or before the night of the 14th and remain there until after Alot HaShachar.
Dawn.
This way he considered a resident of the city according to all opinions. Then even if he returns to Jerusalem early in the morning before managing to read the Megillah, he remains obligated to read the Megillah on that day, the 14th, in Jerusalem.
So you understand what he's saying? Is if you take the train, okay, it's the night of the 14th, and you say, I want to do Purim in Tel Aviv. It's such a great party. So you go to Tel Aviv, you take the train, and then it's, let's say, but nowadays it's about 5 o'clock in the morning. It's dawn. You're in Tel Aviv. Partied all night. You had a good time. And then you take the train back to Jerusalem after dawn. Because you were there at dawn, you're a Tel Avivian. And now I don't care that you took the train back to Jerusalem and now you're sitting in your dorm room and with your hangover in On the 14th.
We're still in our 20s. We don't get that.
Sorry, okay. And on the 14th, you are you were in Tel Aviv at dawn, so you've got to find the Megillah reading, even though nobody's reading the Megillah in Jerusalem on that day, because you were defined as a Tel Avivian because of your early morning escapade. You are going to be defined as a Tel Avivian for that day, even though you left. And now you're in Jerusalem. Doesn't matter. You were defined as a Tel Avivian. Now you're like an alien in New York, right? Right? Don't know the reference? Sting, the British singer. He had a famous hit song called "I'm an Alien in New York" because he was a Brit in New York, and he considered the alien. So this guy is a Tel Avivian, and now he's in Jerusalem. He's a Tel Avivian because at dawn he was in Tel Aviv, even though he took the train, and now he's in Jerusalem all day. He still has to keep Purim on the 14th. Go ahead. In such a case,
he should appoint someone who is staying in walled city.
unwalled, yeah.
Shaliach to give matanot l'Ribyonim, mishloach manot on his behalf. If, on the other hand, a resident of Jerusalem enters a walled city on the night of the 14th with intention to return to Jerusalem before Alo Hashachar of 14, or if he first entered the walled city after Alo Hashachar of the 14th, he returns later on Jerusalem, he is still considered a resident of Jerusalem because the determining time is Alo Hashachar of 14.
Okay, he's trying to be very clear and stick to the definition. The definition is your physical presence
Before
in the morning, at the dawn of the 14th, right? Whether you intended to be, you didn't intend to. You can travel in the daytime of the 14th, travel from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv all you want. Join the celebrations in the daytime. It doesn't make you a Tel Avivian. Oh, because at the morning and the dawn, you were still in Jerusalem. You didn't get defined as a Tel Avivian. Okay, we'll keep going. The opposite.
If in the dawn I am in the way to Jerusalem.
Doesn't, well, on the way
Means you're outside
of Jerusalem.
Yeah, no, but I am not in a city actually.
It's a good question. I'm not sure.
You're not in Jerusalem, so there.
Yeah, I'm not in Jerusalem, but I'm not in a city.
But that's my point. You're not in Jerusalem. So you're
Everywhere other than Jerusalem is
everywhere
obligated on the 14th.
It's
so.
like the terminal with Tom Hanks.
I didn't see that, but
It's about
living in an airport. I see.
He don't have a citizenship.
I
Because
see.
when he got to the airport, that it's neutral zone.
Okay.
It's,
his country collapsed.
collapsed.
So he was stuck in the New York airport, but they wouldn't accept him.
Airports are an
Because
interesting
he didn't
place.
have a
Yeah.
nationality.
I see. Okay, let's keep reading. I'm just looking at the clock. I want to try to read to the end of it. Yossi, will you read for us if a resident?
If a resident of an unwalled city celebrates Purim on the 14th and wants to celebrate the holiday again on the 15th, in Jerusalem, he must come to Jerusalem on the night of the 15th and stay there until after Alot HaShachar of the 15th.
What is the night of the 15th? Wouldn't it be
Well, that's what leads up to Alat HaShachar. The 15th. What's going to define you as a Jerusalemite is going to be the 15th.
No, but wouldn't it be the night of the 14th?
No, the night of the 14th, you're celebrating your Purim in Tel Aviv,
I'm assuming.
right?
Say about the Erev.
It keeps
the
saying
night
Alot
before.
HaShachar.
The
I'm
day, the
assuming
night before the day.
Dawn.
before it's allowed
It's his
for
night.
Tfilas
On the
HaShachar.
14th, you're celebrating the whole day.
Correct. The davening many times shacharit is connected to shachar, right? The same word,
Midnight?
but it means about an hour before.
If you're not allowed to say Tfilas HaShachar yet, then surely you're still in the defining moment.
He's
Yes,
talking about
yes.
biblical time.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, so you're traveling. You did your Purim in Tel Aviv, and now you say, "Let's do Purim again." It was so much fun the first time.
Yeah.
In order to be defined as halachically obligated again, you've got to reach Jerusalem by dawn of the 15th. Go ahead. This way.
he is considered a resident of Jerusalem for the day and must fulfill all the mitzvot of Purim on the 15th. However, he should try to hear the brachot for the Megillah from someone else. And if he reads the Megillah for himself, he should omit the brachot altogether. Because some authorities maintain that one who already observed Purim on the 14th does not need to observe it the second time.
Okay, based on the Rosh. So some people say there's no such thing as two Purims. And so to be careful, we best not to make a bracha on the second day, although some opinions say you can have two Purims. You're in Tel Aviv on the first Purim, and you're in Jerusalem on the second Purim, as long as you're there on both days at the determining moment. But other opinions disagree, and therefore we try to avoid the dispute by not making a bracha yourself. Go ahead, even though he's a halachically. Top of page 377.
Even though he is halachically required to observe Purim on the 15th as well, when it comes to reciting the brachot, we take into account the opinion of those who rule that he is exempt, and therefore omit the brachot. One who is going to be in Jerusalem for the night of the 14th all the way through the day of the 15th must observe Purim only in Jerusalem, and he may recite the brachot over the Megillah on the 15th, according to all opinions.
Okay.
The Rishonim debate the case of a resident of Jerusalem who traveled to an unwalled city on the night of the 14th and planned to return to Jerusalem before Alot HaShachar, but was delayed and did not manage to return in time. Some authorities maintain that his status is determined by his intentions, and thus he is exempt from observing Purim on the 14th.
Right, this is what you were asking about, Renan. If you intended to just go for the party on the 14th at night, you wanted to go to Tel Aviv, you heard you were invited to a nice party, you said, I'll finish the party, I'll hop on the train back to Jerusalem, and I'll be here by the morning of the 14th, so I won't become obligated to read the Megillah. And then the best laid plans of mice and men, right?
Yeah.
Things happen, you drank a little too much maybe, I don't know, and then you stayed longer. Go ahead. Some say even if you stayed longer, you didn't intend to become, so you go by the intention. However, others maintain
that we consider only his actions, and thus he must observe Purim on the 14th.
That's it. If you fell asleep in Tel Aviv, you're there on the morning of the 14th. You became a Tel Avivian against your will, because in the morning of the 14th you were physically present in Tel Aviv. That's what some opinions hold. Doesn't matter what you had in your mind. It matters where you were physically. So it's a debate right here. Go ahead. Within the opinion
That his status is determined by his intention, some maintain that his status is determined by his intention at the time that he traveled to that location, Mishneh Berurah, and others maintain that his status is determined by his intentions when Purim begins. In practice, in both cases, one should observe the mitzvah of Purim without reciting brachot. If added uncertainties arise, one should consult a competent rabbi.
Okay, so that's it. You can see that it gets so complicated, especially if you try to say it goes by your intentions. And the simplest approach which he presented is you go by physical presence. On the morning of the 14th, you're obligated on the 14th. If you're in a city that's obligated. If you're physically present in the morning of the 15th in Jerusalem, you're obligated as a Jerusalemite, even if it happens to be twice, that you have two Purims. That's the common, I think, and the simplest way to paskin. We don't really ignore your intentions, but your intentions get overridden by your actions. And that if you stayed overnight, even though you didn't intend to, you become obligated by that place, which is celebrating Purim, even though you didn't intend to. Yes, Yossi.
So you don't actually have to say the bracha yourself in order to be yotze. You can hear it from someone else.
Correct. That's the way it's suggested, that you let someone else say the Megillah and you'll hear. And if you need a bracha, you said amen. Yeah.
So in both cases, you can always join a minion resident to the city.
Usually that's what's done, yeah. If you have a feeling, I'm intending to come back to Jerusalem by the morning, right? You're going to Tel Aviv from Jerusalem on the 14th, because someone invited you to a Purim party. Okay. Hopefully it's a very religious Purim party. It's very tzanua. There won't be any mixing of the sexes. But it's a very kosher, but it's friends that you want to see. And they're in Tel Aviv, and they're celebrating Purim. And you want to show them your fancy costume. You're dressing up like Moshe Rabbeinu. and they're dressing up like the Kohen Gadol. Whatever it is, it's very cool costumes, and you want to go and celebrate with them. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Maybe you should be learning Torah. It's true, okay, but it's also important to see friends sometimes. And so they invite you over on the night of the 14th to Tel Aviv, and you're really intending to come back because you don't want to get messed up. And how are you going to have the Purim Suda with if in Tel Aviv you don't really know anybody? They're only having a party at night. So you say, I'm going to just go and come back. So really that's what you should do. Go and come back that night before dawn. Because if you don't, then you get into trouble. But you realize, well, sometimes things happen. So the smarter thing would be to do is to, just in case, go a little early, hear the Megillah. Don't say the bracha yourself. Hear somebody else. Say the Megillah. On the night of the 14th, pretend you might be a Tel Avivian for the day. Hear the Megillah at night, properly, in a shul. And it's a party too. Reading the Megillah on the night of the 14th. Break your fast there after reading the Megillah. And then have your party and come back to Jerusalem. If you don't make it, then you'll have to find the second Megillah reading in the morning. But there's lots of Megillah readings in Tel Aviv in the morning. That's where people are celebrating Purim. It's not such a big problem to find a minyan in Tel Aviv in the morning. You'll hear the Megillah a second time just in case that your intention was not enough because you slept over or whatever it is. And then, okay, give a little tzedakah. Matanot le'evyonim. It's not so hard. What did we say? It's 1 shekel minimum. Give two le'evyonim. It's plural, right? You give to tzedakah to 2 people. Nowadays, you can do it, as I said, in a credit card, or call up one of these funds, and they'll distribute it for you. It's not hard. You don't have to go looking for a poor person. Mishloach manot. Okay. You buy 2 types of food and give it to someone. Doesn't have to be your friend. Anybody in the street. Okay. You can buy them in the makolet, prepackaged mishloach manot. It has a bamba and maybe a little bottle of wine and maybe some wafers. Give it to someone. Very easy. Fulfill all the mitzvot. The only biggest problem is the mishteh. Sit down and have a falafel. Sit down and have a falafel with a little cup of wine, just to be sure. And then you fulfilled maybe the first Purim. Come back to Jerusalem a little later than you planned, but it's during the day. And then you'll be in time for Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem also, you'll hear the Megillah in shul. Someone will make the bracha on the Megillah. You'll say amen. You'll have your second Purim. And in the morning, you'll wake up in your bed and you'll go to shul. And you'll do maybe a little bit more mishloach manot than where you actually know more people. And you'll have the proper mishteh. This year is probably in the morning because it's Friday. And then you'll have 2 Purims, just in case. You will be avoiding the brachot of the Megillah, which usually you avoid anyways, because only somebody who reads on their own the Megillah do they say the brachot on the Megillah. If you're in shul with a minyan, the reader says the bracha on behalf of everybody. So that could happen, and it's not the end of the world. You'll get to know the Megillah very well. You're hearing it 4 times. After having prepared, hopefully. And it's amazing. Each time we read it, we notice new things, notice new insights. Tov, okay, that's our session for today. Bezrat Hashem. We're going to move on soon.
We're done with
Good day. Almost done with
Wait,
Purim, the laws of Purim. We're going to move on to the laws of Pesach.
It's done. Man, done.
Yes, it's done. Obviously,
Moshe, the funny thing is it doesn't turn off.
Yeah, that's
that's
the cookie.
So you could just turn off the computer,
Pretty much
turn off
finished.
the phone, and that'll do it.
we have like a
Also, you notice that you put this right on
Yes.
this button? Maybe that's what happened.
No, it's not.
That's
Not
what
it.
happened? Okay.
Because this is a little sunken in.
Yeah.